Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. Excited to have another episode out. I don't want to jinx myself, but I think we're getting into a groove here. So before we jump into our discussion, I do want to give a couple updates as to what's going on here on the farm. We had a transport. Well, I can't say transport. We had an attempted transport of one of our boars down to our sows, and using a system that has worked for me before didn't work so well. So I think we actually did a video on our YouTube channel about it. We were having an issue getting Squealy Dan to get in the trailer to drive down the valley to get released in with the sows. And wouldn't you know it, after 4 days of putting food out to lure him into the trailer, on the fifth day, just getting aggravated, I just left the gate open. And he walked all the way down the valley and walked right into with the sows. So, well, you know. There it goes. So what I've seen over the past week is very good evidence of his ability to at least deliver the package, if you know what I mean. So he has mounted 2 of my 3 sows, one of which is actually the oldest sow, Merida, which she hasn't settled in a couple years. And you may wonder, why do you keep a pig on the farm that doesn't settle, doesn't do anything? Yeah, I know. You get to the point where you have one that's too smart to get on the trailer, and then it kind of just becomes a pet. So I have a feeling Merida's going to live out her days until she keels over, and then I have to drag her up on the hill and let the crows have her. I ain't digging a hole as big as I need to put that pig in. But anyway, totally derailed that conversation. So so we've got some breeding going on now. We are breeding later in the year. You guys may be wondering, hey, isn't that kind of late to be breeding? Doesn't that mean you're going to farrow in January? Yes, that does. It is kind of where we're going to be with farrowing. I'm trying to get on a schedule where we're going to be processing our pigs in September, October, and these pigs are finishing out around 8 to 9 months. So I'd like to have that lined up. But as far as keeping them warm, we've got our farrowing barn, we've got our creep area, and we'll be adding heat to the creep area there. So we should be okay when it comes to those issues. And I've talked to a lot of you on this podcast, and some of you do that as well, where you actually prefer to farrow in the wintertime when you have the infrastructure, because the creep heater allows the piglets to go over there to hang out and reduces crushing potential. So they roll back to mom when it's time to nurse, but they hang out in the creep area when it's time to just chill and take a nap. So we'll obviously detail as we go along. We'll see who settles. He's, like I said, he's bred 2 of the 3, and I believe the third sow, she should be coming into heat here hopefully in the next week or so. But we'll do updates as we go along. Oh, speaking of updates, don't forget, check out the pasturedpig.com website and our Facebook group, The Pastured Pig. Got some discussion going on there from time to time. So the group is growing daily, it seems like. So if you haven't joined that group, by all means, please do so. And what else? Patreon. Obviously, don't forget about our Patreon support. I do want to, one thing I have not done, and I apologize to you supporters, but one thing I've not done is given shout outs, and I'm going to go down the list real quick in the order of those that have been supporting for the longest. And I really appreciate every single person on this list, and wouldn't be able to do what we're doing without that support. It's allowing me to justify the expenses, the time, all the stuff that goes with hosting a podcast and going through all those steps. So I want to give a shout out to Noah, to Chet, to Fritz, to Nathan, to Jed, to Delaney, to Chuck, to John, to Jesse, to Bill, to Adam, Rob, Tina, Bonnie, Chris, Jason, Davis, Eric, Michael, Brad, Jesse, John, Kelly, Laura, and our latest addition, if I can read my own writing, is Verna Flower Farm. So I don't know if that's her name or if that's the company, but anyway, I really appreciate every single person on that list. Thank you so much. those of you guys that have supported. And I appreciate the feedback. And I'll give a shout out to Noah again. Noah does a good job of telling me when something doesn't sound quite right or I've messed up, because he's Johnny on the spot on that. And I really appreciate that. And I apologize to you people for having these audio mistakes here recently. But when you think you got things ironed out, it's like right when I started recording this bumper, I'm like, why is my audio not working? I've got my headphones on. Everything's running. I can't hear anything through my headphones, and realized I was wearing the wrong headphones. I keep two sets. There's a set to one side that's for one purpose, and a set to the other side that plugs into my my head unit, my Scarlett. That's what I record all my audio in for podcasts, and that's the reason I couldn't hear it. I was wearing the wrong headphones. So to say it's operator error is a gross understatement. All right, well, let's carry on. Today, we are going to go in kind of a little different direction. We're going to be more topical, and instead of visiting a specific farm, but instead of just me yakking at you guys through the abyss of the podcast, I invited somebody who I've gotten to know really well over the last year or so, and been able to be down his farm. Chuck invited us to come down and be a guest speaker during his pastured pig workshop, and really appreciate that. Really enjoyed that. It was great meeting him and his crew. So I invited Chuck to come back on Sheraton Park Farms. If you guys, he's been on the podcast, and it's been a while since he's been on. He was one of, I think he was in our first 20 or 30 episodes there. He was up near the front of that. But I asked Chuck to come back on because we're going to talk about specifically the topic of castration, and get into the details, the gory details of why, when, how, and of course the complications, the pros and cons, and what the national and international community is doing to possibly eliminate castration or to change the entire process. So this is something if you guys farrow on farm, I want you to keep in your mind. Actually, even if you don't farrow on farm, you're getting feeders. Most likely you're not ordering feeders that are intact. So this will apply to all of us. If some of these European laws and Australian laws, New Zealand laws, if they end up coming over to the States and taking hold, then it's something we're going to have to be wary of. So keep that in mind. But we're going to hop into this conversation, and I'll catch you guys on the tail end. Instead of talking to a farmer about their setup, we're going to talk to another pastured pig farmer about a process that should be, I don't want to say near and dear. How would you say that, Chuck? Is this a process that's near and dear to your heart?
Well, I don't know that it's near and dear to my heart, but it's one of those things that we have to do. So,
right.
It's just the way it works out.
Very good. Very good. Absolutely. It's one of the necessary evils, if we can call it that, on the farm. And that topic is castration. So, man, there is a lot of discussion around castration, the pros and cons of it, the alternatives to it, the humaneness of it in the processes in which we do here in America. So we're going to take some time to dive into that. And what I've done is I've recruited Chuck Lewis from Sheraton Park Farms out of North Carolina. And you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with Chuck. He's been on the podcast before. You probably are familiar with his YouTube channel. He's got some really good content out there when it comes to pastured piggery and kind of all things pasture. He's got the gamut covered there. So, Chuck, first of all, welcome. How are you today?
Man, Troy, I'm good. I really appreciate the invite. Thanks for including me.
Very good. Well, very good. I just, you were the first guy to come to mind, and Chuck and I have, we've spent some time together. He had me down at his farm, and I know you guys have heard that on the podcast, that they were doing a pastured pig workshop on their farm. They do a lot of education on their farm, and I really, really like that. So they take a lot of time to set aside their farm. Well, they don't set it aside. It still has to be done, but to figure in how to do all their farm work while still putting on these educational events throughout the year. So I'm obviously going to put some links down below in the show notes. If you're not familiar with Chuck somehow, then you'll be able to find him and see what he's got going on there. But Chuck, real quick, tell us, for those people that maybe don't remember and they're trying to connect the dots, or maybe they're new to the podcast, tell us a little bit about Sheraton Park Farms first.
Sure. Yeah. When you and I talked, gosh, what's that been? Maybe 2 years ago now, Troy, when we done the initial podcast with me.
Yeah, it was about 2 years ago.
Yeah, so at the time we were on 20 acres down in the central part of North Carolina, and since then we've actually sold that farm and moved into northwestern North Carolina, kind of where my wife Sandra and I are originally from. We've got 70 acres right here at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. We raise chickens for eggs, chickens for meat. We do some turkeys. We do some beef cattle on our farm, and of course, our favorite pigs. And so we're kind of a farrow to finish operation. We do some artificial insemination and breeding, farrow on pasture, and then we raise those pigs out and process them. And we do a lot of direct to retail cuts with our customers. We do wholes halves. Like we tell folks, we'll sell you a pack of sausage or we'll sell you the whole pig. We can package it any way you want. So that's in a nutshell, that's what we do.
Yeah. So that key point of moving to the new farm, I didn't get to see the first farm, but I saw the one they're on now, and that is a gorgeous tract of land. I tell you, I'm jealous of the pasture you have, the water you have, basically all the lay of the land. I know I'm not supposed to be jealous, but a really nice setup you have there. Love that building too. The building that he uses. What would you call that? Was that your catch-all workshop? Because you've done cooking in there. You've done education. You do some of your video work in there. You do everything in that building.
Yeah, that's kind of farm central. We've got a 40 by 60 shop building that was here whenever we bought property. And we use it for a little bit of everything. We've got storage in there. When I tell folks when we first moved, it looked like a Goodwill had thrown up in there. We had tools and clothes and TVs and everything stored in there. And since then, we've got everything cleaned out, and we use it primarily as a shop. So we take equipment and tools and things in there to do repairs and just general farm maintenance. And then we've got some storage, and then it works out great for like the classes. It's a perfect classroom. We can fling the doors open. We can shut them, turn on a little bit of heat. It's not an insulated building, so it doesn't get warm. We can knock the chill off. Good place to just have. We've had some family gatherings in there. It's kind of farm central for us.
Yeah, it's nice, very very nice, and the proximity of where it's located on the farm. Yeah, it does kind of feel like it's the hub of the wagon wheel, pretty much. So
yeah,
very cool.
Sure is.
So well, let's do this. Let's go ahead and dive into our topic, and I'm sure as we get into specifics, then will people be able to glean more information about your farm, because as Providence would have it, today, the day that we scheduled to do this interview and to discuss castration, tell everybody what you and Sandra were doing this morning, Chuck.
Yeah, so our local community college, Wilkes Community College here, about 25 minutes down the road, they have an animal science program, and we have befriended some of their instructors. And one of their instructors gave me a call a couple of weeks ago and said, "Hey, would there be any way you guys could do a castration demonstration on some piglets?" And I said, "Sure, we'd be glad to." And so we just by happenstance, we had 4 about 8-week-old piglets. So we went up there this morning and we caught a couple of them and put them in some dog kennels, took them down to the community college, and done a castration demonstration for their Intro to Animal Science program. So, we've still got blue coat and betadine on our hands from the castration this morning.
So this is definitely fresh on Chuck's mind when we did discuss this topic.
Yep.
So,
sure.
I guess I don't want to go down this rabbit trail, but the first thing I think of in what you just said is I'm picturing all of you out in the pasture trying to catch up 4 8-week-old piglets. How did that go?
So actually it went pretty well. We've, and that really could probably almost be an entire podcast episode in itself for on weaning. We've tried a number of different ways on the best way to catch piglets when it comes to weaning time. And quite frankly, what we found over the course of about 10 days to 2 weeks before we're ready to wean those piglets, we'll start putting a little bit of feed outside of that single strand electric where those piglets and the mamas are at. And so the piglets kind of get used to coming outside and, getting a little bit of feed. So what we do is we just take our little stock trailer that we borrow from a friend and just back it right up. We feed the piglets outside. We go over and feed the mamas in the paddock where they're at. And while those piglets are eating, we'll just kind of come up behind them and grab that hind leg, snatch them up and put them up in the trailer real quick. The mamas are busy eating. They hear that initial squeal. Everybody looks up, looks around. we get the piglet in the trailer as quickly as we can to get that squealing stopped, and the mamas just turn right around and go right back to eating. I mean, it's pretty clean and works. It works really well. It works better than, trap doors and catch pins and that kind of thing. It's simple and it's effective.
Oh, that's great. Excellent. Very good. Yeah, that's worth a video right there on the channel for sure. All right. So, that was a little hot there. Sorry about that. So let's do this. So what is, I know that most of our audience listening knows why castration of piglets is different than castration of other ruminants, but Chuck, I'll let you take this first topic. So why is it, I'm sure you've run into this, when you talk about castration to people that are vaguely familiar with farming, or maybe they've farmed in the past, and what's the first thing they say, or what have you run into when people know you're going to castrate and they don't fully understand that pig castration is a surgical process? What do you run into there?
Yeah, so a lot of people just their question is, why do you do that? And we try to go in and provide some explanation on the purpose and the reason why we do it. And there's a number of reasons why we do it on our farm. Number one, we're trying to avoid unwanted pregnancy. We're in a part of the country where we try to be selective about when we're farrowing piglets. We certainly don't want a sow farrowing piglets during the coldest part of the winter, January, February, March. So first thing, we don't want intact males that are here that are impregnating females whenever we don't want that happening. And second, and this is probably the primary reason why we do castration. We're a production farm. We're currently processing about 60 pigs per year, and we sell those direct to retail to the customer. There's a lot of discussion around vortain, and we can get into that in a little bit more detail here in a few minutes. But for us, it's just not worth the risk to process an animal, sell that to a customer, and then a customer not be happy with the product because of a smell or a taste.
Yeah.
And so we just want to make sure that we're producing a high quality product that customers can enjoy. And for us, castration is a quick, simple process. Sometimes whenever we're weaning piglets and we're doing castration, we'll castrate 15 or 20 at a time. And just because we're selling those products direct retail, it's just not worth the risk to have a product that potentially could have vortain on it.
Yeah. I think that's dead on. And yeah, we are going to get into taint a little bit further in this discussion, but I think you made a really good point there, especially as a production farm. When you look at when your process includes selling individual cuts to people, we're not talking about, hey, one boar got sold to one person as a whole pig, and that person's upset because everything they fry up just really smells funky or has a bad taste to it. We're talking about, in your situation where you guys sell cuts, you could have a boar be disseminated in sausage and hams and pork chops, disseminated across tens, if not hundreds of customers. So you could really get your business turned sideways real quick with one interaction of taint.
Yeah, exactly. We like, for example, our sausages, we do 50 pounds of sausage per flavor. So if we actually had a boar that went through that had taint, and we decide that, we're going to grind the majority of that animal, it wouldn't be out of the question for us to have 100, 150 pounds of sausage that had a bad smell or a bad flavor to it.
Yeah.
And, you stretch that across 150 customers, and, word of mouth in this business, that's king. And word of mouth can be good, or you can have some detrimental outcomes for that, because folks, say, hey, don't go buy off this guy because his sausage smells like it's terrible.
Yeah.
And that can be a real damager to the business. So again, for us, it's just not worth the risk.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to add to that. I think there's another element. It's not something to really run into a lot, but I think it's just best practices. But another element is when it comes to basically just herd safety. If you've got a decent sized herd and you've got a lot of intact males, depending on your breed and how long you keep them on pasture, that as those gilts start to develop sexually, and the boars even prior to them developing sexually, I always say before they can actually pitch, they're going to be in the batter's cage taking some swings, but and that can become an issue of injury. So the boars can be too aggressive to the gilts. You can start to knock them around a little bit. You can have some injury there. You could have additional stress from the boar and from the gilts that are being raised up in that litter. But then also to the farmer himself, a boar could has a tendency to be a little bit more aggressive to the handler in that situation. So castration can eliminate a lot of those things. So there's no sexual maturity elements there, and then of course the aggression could be minimalized. Now I haven't done a side-by-side comparison of that on my farm, but it obviously makes sense to some degree.
Yeah, and we've actually seen that. Historically we had done a lot of AI. We had decided to try to use some intake males, and we had some management issues, and we lost out on some breeding opportunities there. But that was one thing that we really did notice when we would have the boars separated from the females. And if we had a female that was coming into heat, love finds a way. And we were having a lot of breakouts, and either boars going to the females or the females coming to the boars. And so that became, another management challenge for us.
Yeah.
Another issue, in terms of safety, we have a lot of visitors on our farm. We have a lot of folks that want to come by and, they're coming by to purchase product or do a farm tour, or, whatever the case may be. But we have a lot of kids around, and, that's another thing. We just can't take the chance of someone getting hurt because we have an intake male who's a little bit aggressive. So again, it's just, there's a lot of reasons that we elect to castrate those males. Safety is a huge one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good stuff. Okay. So let's talk about this. So, again, I know most people listening know this, but castration of a pig is a surgical process. This is not a banding process like we would have with ruminants, your sheep, your cows, your goats. You're not going to be just taking a small tool and a rubber band and banding it, and then a couple days later just double checking on that. This is a surgical process, so this does involve scalpel, a knife. There is cutting involved. There is blood, of course. So that's why it's a little different, and sometimes people don't fully understand that that's the process that needs to be done, and can't understand why you just can't band a pig. So we're going to get into discussion a little bit about the actual how, the details, and Chuck's going to kind of share how he does it. I'll share how I do it. Obviously, there's multiple ways to skin that proverbial cat, but let's first start with when. So Chuck, when do you castrate your piglets?
So we elect to castrate our piglets at about 8 weeks, and we kind of do an all-in-one day for those piglets. So we wean, we castrate, and we worm all on the same day. The reason that we do that is we only want to stress that animal one time. And so at 8 weeks, we'll go in and we'll catch those piglets up, pull them off of their moms, like I was kind of describing earlier. We'll take them to another part of the farm where we've got a weaning/training pen set up, and then we'll take those piglets out of the trailer. The females will get a worming shot, and then they'll go over into the training pen. The boys, they have a little bit more adventure with us, and we'll pull them out, do the castration, give them their first worming shot, and then they go over in.
Yeah.
Again, for us, it's stressing that animal one time, as opposed to, doing castration at, I think some folks will do it at 2, 3, 4 days old.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly no problem with that. We just elect not to do that. We do it all in one.
Yeah. So let's stick a pin in that, because this is where, first of all, Kelly would absolutely punch me in the nose if I waited till 8 weeks and had her involved in castration process, because it stresses her out when we do ours at 7 days. So at 7 days old, we're snatching up all the little boars, and similar process. We grab them, put them in a transport. Basically, it's just a big crate on the back of the side-by-side, and take them down to my workshop, where I have a little surgical setup there, and then we castrate, and then of course release back in, and then we wean and deworm at the 8 week mark. So I definitely understand and appreciate, and would definitely appreciate handling it once versus twice. But in my experience, man, an 8 week old pig is like wrestling it's like trying to put a sweater on a 7-year-old, man. It just ain't going to happen very easily. So let's talk about your process, the actual process. So when you catch these things up, how are you subduing the piglet in order to actually make your surgical cuts?
Yeah. So real quick, before I get into that, I've got to tell you a real quick story about our very first castration. We had bought some male piglets that had not been cut. And it was one of those things, you've never done it. You fret over it, you worry about it,
Sure.
and you just essentially end up putting it off. So the very first pigs we ever castrated were about 12 weeks old.
Wow.
And that involved me, my Sandra's brother, and Sandra. And I would not recommend that. Don't let those piglets get to that age. At 12 weeks, it really almost becomes a two-person job. At 7 days, yes, I think one person could probably do it, without much problem. So what we do is we will catch the piglet up by the hind legs with its belly basically facing me. I'm usually the guy holding, and Sandra's the person that's doing the surgical work. And that's a little bit concerning to have a wife that has that particular skill, but that's a story for another time.
Watch what you say, right?
Yeah.
Got to walk the line.
So yeah, that's right. Yeah. Minding your P's and Q's around her. So I'll catch that thing up by the hind legs with its belly facing me. And then basically I'll just swing it between my legs, and we'll put it on its back on the ground. And frankly, I sit on it.
Yeah.
It's not putting all of your weight on it. It's just enough to control that animal. Any of you that's picked up a piglet by the hind legs, those things can feel like a washing machine out of balance. And whenever you get them on their back, that's the last place a piglet ever wants to be, is on its back and not on its feet. So I just basically put it, hold that thing down kind of between the inside of my legs. We'll take its hind legs and just push them down toward its abdomen. And that will help to express the testicles kind of towards the rear end of the piglet. And then Sandra will, from that point, she'll reach up, pull the testicles up manually with her hand through the skin. And that's how we start the process.
Yeah. Do you find it's helpful, and maybe this is more of a question for Sandra, obviously you're there watching, but do you find it works best? So and I love what you said, you pushing the hind legs forward will express the testicles up more.
Yeah.
Because, that's, again, everybody listening, I know, probably have seen pig testicles. So we're not talking about a sack hanging down. We're literally, two little, half walnuts sticking out that you've got to reveal. So when you push those hind legs down, it expresses the testicles. And then as I usually take my thumb and forefinger and try to get in the front and back, but not only am I lifting up, but kind of moving back. I try to move back towards the anus as much as possible, just to try to avoid hernia. And knock on wood, in all the castrations I've done, I've never had a pig develop a hernia. Do you guys find little techniques like that to be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. And that also brings up another good point. Before we start the castration on that animal, we'll look at its abdomen and evaluate and see if there's any sign of a hernia. Is there any bulging, or is there anywhere that it looks like that the abdominal wall may be weak and you're starting to get a little bit of intestine through there? If there's a couple things that we change. Sometimes we'll elect not to do that. We'll elect not to castrate that animal, and we'll process it, much younger, kind of as a suckling pig kind of thing, and not let it reach sexual maturity. But that's one thing we do, is we evaluate that animal before we do the castration to make sure that we're not potentially painting ourselves into a corner.
Yeah.
But yeah, pulling those testicles back towards the anus with just a little bit of pressure, it really brings them up to the top of the skin and makes them much easier to identify.
Yeah, very good. So what do you do as far as sterilization, cleaning, prep prior to making your cut? Do you do anything there?
Yeah, so we use a little bit of iodine. We just get it over the counter at your local drugstore, Walmart, wherever, just a brown bottle of iodine. And we'll just, put a couple of squirts around on the scrotum of the iodine. We'll make sure that we're covering all the area where we're going to be doing the incision. And then we use a utility knife, just a cobalt utility knife, and we always trade out and put a brand new blade in right before we start the castration process. It's quick, it's easy, they're very sharp, they're easy to change out, and it's something that you can just toss in your egg bag and just have it with you everywhere you go.
Yeah. Good deal. Yeah, we do the same. We use iodine and a couple liberal squirts, like I said, in the area there. I usually wipe down, because it seems like all my piglets, they know that castration day is the day to roll in the mud. So we tend to have to clean a little bit more. So we're wiping down and with that iodine getting in place. And I get from our local feed store, they have really cheap. I'd say cheap as in expensive, not expensive. They're actually decent quality surgical steel scalpel blade replacements. So similar thing, fresh one, make sure you have a good one in there so you can make your cuts clean and you're not dealing with a rusty knife. But yeah, I've seen old timers. My neighbor, he used to grab one leg and sit him like you said, and just whip out his pocket knife and bang bang, he was done. So whatever you're proficient with, I guess, one tip, if you've never castrated before, the one thing I always say, if you've never cut animal flesh before, the one thing you never want to do is be indecisive and saw or, do, light little strokes. You want to get in there and do it. And so what about that, Chuck? What about the pressure when you're applying pressure to actually make the cut with your utility knife or your scalpel? How would you describe what you're trying to cut through, how far you're supposed to cut, the length of the cut?
Yeah, so that's one thing that we found that you've got to be kind of cognizant of, because that piglet's skin is tough. I mean, it's not like human skin. I mean, it's pig skin. I mean, it's a little bit
like
more
a football,
of a substantial thing.
Yeah.
Like a football, exactly. So when we bring that testicle to the top, you've got to apply some pretty firm pressure to actually get through that epidermal layer, that outer layer of skin. And then what we're looking for there's a thin membrane that covers the testicle. And we always make sure whenever you've got that piglet on its back and you're looking at its scrotum, you'll notice there's a dividing line right down the center of that. And so we're going to work on one side and then we're going to go to the other side. And by putting a little bit of pressure, it brings the testicle to the top. We cut, like you said, you've got to be decisive. You can't ease into it. You've got to make a decisive cut on that thing. Usually it takes about 2 cuts. The first one through the epidermal layer of the skin, and then the second one through that membrane that holds the testicle in. And then by continuing to hold a little bit of firm pressure on the top of that scrotum, typically, if you've got your incision long enough, and we usually go for about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, that testicle will pop right out, kind of like a zit.
Yeah.
And then once that thing pops out, we just grab a hold of it and just pull it with a nice firm pull. That will erupt the spermatic cord and also the artery in the vein, and you're done, ready to go to the other side.
Okay, so you make a good point there, and I know there's actually some debate about this. So you guys are a pull or tear technique versus a cut technique when it comes to the artery, and you just said it, and it totally slipped my mind. The
spermatic cord.
Thank you, spermatic cord.
Yep.
So. Yeah, that's why I love talking to EMTs. They know all this stuff. So, of course, are you technically an EMT, or is it just Sandra that's an EMT?
No, yeah, I've been a paramedic for this year will be 30 years.
Okay,
yeah.
I thought so. I want to make sure I wasn't overstating that. But, so the getting back to either tearing or pulling that, or actually cutting it with a scalpel. So why, Chuck, in your experience, is it better to pull and rend those two elements there versus cutting through with a scalpel or a knife?
Yeah, so whenever you pull, particularly the artery and the vein, that immediate trauma to it will cause the artery and the vein to withdraw and constrict. And what we found is we have a lot less bleeding post-procedure whenever we do that.
Yeah. And I learned that. I was kind of guy that I thought, well, you always got to cut. Cutting's cleaner, just cut. And so the first couple times I cut, and then as I got into this more, it's like, well, people are tearing. Why are they just pulling and tearing? And then seeing that firsthand, that it's and what is explained to me is that a cut is almost too clean, and that the piglet's body doesn't react as well to heal and to scab over in that process, or to start to heal from that cut. That the tear actually is the proper, I don't know if that's the right term, proper form of trauma, that it's going to actually introduce healing faster than the cut. So the bleeding is going to be much, much less.
Yeah, it reduces the amount of hemorrhage. Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So what you've done, you've made 2 cuts, you've extracted the testicles, you've rent them free. What do you do next? Is there anything you do to close? Do you wrap up with anything? Do you treat before you turn them loose?
Yeah. So the next thing we do is we spray an antiseptic spray onto the incision sites, and we pick up just a general. It's called Blue Coat.
Mm-hmm.
We pick it up at the local feed store. I think they also make it in Red Coat. But yeah, that's kind of a. It doesn't really seal, but it's more of a. It's more of an antiseptic
mm-hmm.
kind of antibacterial spray that we put on there, because when you put those piglets over in that weaning pen, after they've had their testicles removed, it seems like the first thing they do is go drag their butt right through the mud. I mean, that's the first thing. And I guess they're trying to, find some kind of relief to the discomfort that they feel. So, I mean, they're going to instantly kind of introduce, all kinds of dirt and mud and
mm-hmm.
bacteria and poo and all that kind of thing into those incision sites. So we try to give them a little bit of a head start and put a little bit of that Blue Coat. It's an antiseptic, antibacterial on there, and it seems to work great.
It's interesting you say that, because I was doing the same thing, and I actually switched from doing that, stopped putting Blue Coat or doing any post-treatment, simply because I had heard, or was suggested to me that, well, the Blue Coat or anything you put on is it's a stinging. It's like alcohol in a wound type of thing, so it's going to make them
mm-hmm.
drag their butts in the dirt. And I got to say, I think it's. I don't know. I think it's farm legend type of thing, like an urban legend that I think a piglet, if you just cut him open, he's going to drag his butt around no matter what, because I haven't really noticed a difference.
Oh, yeah.
And then so we, with that pre-cleaning of iodine, as long as the blood has subsided, what I usually do is, since I'm in the workshop, I've got this big crate, so I usually put them back in the crate and let them hang out there for a while, let them chill out, take a little
mm-hmm.
nap, and it seems like they seem to heal up better, and then maybe an hour or two later turn them loose back into with the other pigs.
Yeah, I had never thought of that or ever tried it. I mean, that may be something we give a shot to, is castrate them, maybe put them back in the trailer and kind of let them hang out there, for 45 minutes or an hour before we move them over into the pen. That's a good idea.
Yeah, the only reason, and again, man, it's things that you hear or things you think of, and the way I'm wired, it's like I think of every possible negative outcome, and it's just like, okay, if there's blood hanging off these pigs, there's a chance that there's going to be cannibalism, because they're put them in with the mamas, and the mama's like, oh, my pig's injured,
mm-hmm.
I gotta so it's like, okay, I really want to make sure the blood has subsided before we turn them loose back in there. But in that situation, you're weaning, so you're already separating from the sows anyway. So
yeah.
Okay, so so we've talked about the process. We've talked about the age in which we recommend castrating. But I mean, you can really castrate. There's some guys and gals that have told some stories on this podcast of castrating year-old boars and that type of stuff. Now, I don't have the guts to do that kind of stuff, but I've heard stories of where they back them into a corner, or actually force them into a corner nose first and hobble them and sit there with a scalpel and cut it. But I just couldn't imagine. I mean, my boars are a couple years old, and we're not talking about little walnuts at this point. We're talking about softballs. We're talking about massive reproductive organs here, that if you're going to start cutting on something that big, on an animal that big, then there's going to be ramifications. So not only is it a task that I would not want to take on, castrating an older boar, but just the safety issues for the boar itself. I mean, hemorrhaging and infection, all that's just going to be amplified the older that boar is. Would you agree?
I would. And, that's certainly not something that I would be willing to take on. And, like I said earlier, we'd done some 12-week-old piglets, and I wouldn't even recommend doing that. And I've heard the same thing. I've heard some old farmers talk about castrating those older boars and then feeding them out, for another 2 to 4 weeks, and that eliminates boar pain. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I think if you were going to castrate an adult male pig, I really would rather have a veterinarian do that, where they have got the tools and the equipment and the anesthesia, because that animal really needs to be sedated. I mean, that could, you start thinking about a 350 or 400 pound pig, and you're cutting on his junk, and he turns around and decides he's going to do something about it. You're at his mercy, and that could not be a good outcome for everybody.
No, nobody wins in that circumstance, for sure.
Not at all.
Yeah. And you talk about anesthesia, and we're going to get to that here in a second, but I think of farmer anesthesia. one of our sows, our breeding sows, she had a split hoof, and I wanted to really get a good look at it. So I got her I got her a 6-pack of Natty Light, and she enjoyed that and kind of flopped down there and let me do those type of investigations. But I don't know how much beer it'd take to get a full size boar drunk to be able to cut his balls off.
Yeah, it would take a lot. I would imagine it would take a whole lot.
Yeah, that may have to be a keg or something. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So, well, let's do this. So, yeah, we've danced around the boar taint discussion, but let's go ahead and dive into that. And so, in the rest of this conversation, I don't want to say I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'm going to reference a document. And if I can get my camera or my computer to wake up here, it helps if I'm using the right one. I want to reference a document from the American Veterinarian Medical Association. Now, this document's actually from 2013, so it's almost 10 years old, but it talks about it's the welfare implications of swine castration, and it's a real basic document, but it has tons and tons of references, and I will link to that in our show notes. So if you guys want to take a deeper dive into some of this, then you'll be able to reference that and do so. But I want to read this one sentence here, and this is footnoted out the wazoo. So it's talking about boar taint. It says, boar taint is an accumulation of compounds, and I'm going to slaughter these names. I should have you read this, Chuck. You're better at this than I would be. Such as skatole and androstenone in meat of intact males that cause an unpleasant smell and taste that is released when the pork is heated. About 75% of consumers find meat from boars objectionable in comparison with meat from castrated males. And then I found this interesting as well. The prevalence and intensity of consumer preference varies on the basis of human genotype. And that's something, when I first got into pigs, that was always the first thing that was thrown at me, or the evidence that I was given that, or I don't say evidence, but some of the key talking points about boar taint was that not all humans could pick up on boar taint, that it was a genetic thing, that I could be eating a pork chop and Kelly could be sitting across the table having a pork chop, and I think it tastes great and she think it smells like a dead animal, and it could be genetic. So this article is saying that there is a genetic element involved in this, and I always thought it was about 50%, but this is saying, and it's painting with a broader brush, that 75% of consumers find meat from boars objectionable compared to barrows. So what do you think about that, Chuck? That 75% of people find something objectionable about meat from a boar.
Yeah, so I've heard that same thing, and I'm with you. I'd always heard it was a little bit smaller number. I was surprised to read that it was 75%.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever been exposed to a piece of pork that had come from a sexually mature male. So personally, I don't know if I'm susceptible to it or not. But we go back to thinking about those customers that we have, and 75%. I mean, if you put a piece of meat out there that's got boar taint on it, 3 times out of 4, somebody's going to find that objectionable. And for us, from the business perspective, it's just not worth it. So, I have zero experience with it. I've never smelled boar taint. Don't know what it smells like. Don't know what it tastes like. But it's just, for us, it's just not worth the risk.
Yeah. So here's kind of Troy's twisted red tool house experimentation. Kind of makes me sound like Frankenstein here to some degree, but, so Cam and I, my youngest, we butchered and processed one of our boars on farm. It was, if those of you guys are listening, I've probably given updates about it, but it was Napoleon. He was a bit of a jerk. He was actually a late bloomer, so that's why we wanted to get him out of the breed line. So Napoleon was intact. He was probably about 2 years old, so he was extremely virile. In fact, he was wearing out the other boars all the time because he wanted to prove his virility, and so he was definitely mature. So all the hormones, all those things should have been rocking. He and the other boars could pick up the sows and heat even down the valley from on our farm. So all the things that are supposed to get boar taint rocking were rocking there because he was there. So we process him, and that was just the easiest way for me to eliminate him from the breed line. I wasn't going to take him and pay to have a processor do it. Just simply, in fact, if it was indeed tainted, I didn't want to spend all that money processing something that was going to become dog food. So that's what we did. We processed him on farm with the idea that, well, if this has taint, then we will just use it for dog food. So after we skinned him out and eviscerated him, we had him hanging in the barn for a while in the midwinter. Then Kelly went down and sliced off a little bit of his back fat and fried it up and was looking for the signs. And by looking, was smelling for the signs of boar taint. She experienced no unpleasant odor. So Cam and I decided to go ahead and break him down completely. We made sausage. We did bacon. We did, what did we do? We did some bratwurst. We did all that kind of stuff. And so over the course, obviously I can't sell that because I process it on farm, and as Chuck said, I wouldn't take that risk. But as friends and family have hung out, and some of my good close friends be like, hey man, try some of this sausage. I made it myself and tell me what you think. So that was my test. I didn't tell them that, hey, this was an intact male. There's a chance it's going to smell real funky. I wasn't going to say that, right? I wanted them to give me feedback because they're close friends. I would assume they'd be honest with me and say, hey man, that pork I get from you is normally good, but this sausage you gave me, smelled like a dead cat. So I didn't get any of that. So either I happen to have all my friends that are in that 25% that can't pick up on that, or 50% if you follow the old numbers that I was always introduced to, or Napoleon didn't have taint. So what do you think about that, Chuck? From your perspective, how would you try to explain that?
I wonder if it has something to do. I wonder if it's breed specific.
Yeah.
Are some breeds more susceptible than others?
Yeah.
I don't know how to explain that. That's real interesting, because you would have thought that if you had some taint somewhere along the way, someone would have said, "Hey, man, where did you get this nasty stuff at? Sure, you didn't grow this."
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that's interesting. And again, I wonder if it's diet related.
Yep.
You guys are pasturing these pigs. You're raising them in the woods. It's not a CAFO pig.
Yeah.
So that animal's out in a much more natural environment. So does that have something to do with it? I would imagine that the document that you're referencing, and I've read that, I'm wondering if, is that more specific to a CAFO animal as opposed to a pasture-raised animal?
Yeah, I believe so. I definitely think this document, if it's taking pastured pigs into consideration, it never mentions it throughout the document. Everything I read makes it sound like this is definitely high production, density stocked pig operation. But you bring up a good point, and I don't know if Walt Jeffries listens to the podcast. We've had him on before, but he has some really good blog articles that he's written about boar taint. And his argument would be, yes, it is breed and feed, that you can breed out boar taint and you can possibly even feed out boar taint. Now we use a conventional feed. I don't have access to non-GMO or organic or anything like that. So I literally just use a conventional pig feed. So my feed is what I would assume is what most CAFOs would be using. But as Chuck pointed out, my pigs have access to pasture. They have access to great forage here in the woods. So all the mass that's coming on right now. So they get more of an eclectic diet. But my breed is also, mine are large blacks. So they're more of a heritage breed. And I think you're right, Chuck, that when we look at CAFOs and we just think of the standard pink pig that's raised on concrete, that there's probably... We know there's not a lot of genetic variation in that, right? So there could be something there that, whether it's hybrid vigor or whether it's some more of these old heritage lines, that boar taint may not be an issue simply because of the breed line.
Yeah, and with keeping that breed line so closed on those CAFO pigs, is that something that breed is perpetuating because it's not having any kind of genetic diversity introduced into the breed line?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know that I ever, because my grandparents, great grandparents, a lot of my family raised pigs over the years. I don't ever remember anyone talking about boar taint, and they would from time to time slaughter a boar.
Yeah.
And just hang the meat, in the smokehouse, can the sausage, do all the regular stuff, and just treat it like it was a female or a barrow.
Yeah.
I don't remember anyone ever talking about boar taint or having pork that had a bad taste to it.
Yeah, I agree. Being born and raised in Appalachia and having family that had been involved in raising hogs and ever. And I remember I had a great uncle that my dad would always tell this story that he would go around town and get the old get all the restaurant scraps. Not that I'm condoning this, but back in that day, he'd get all the restaurant scraps and he'd have this slop truck. And my dad would say that truck smelled like rolling death. But he'd come in with that truck and he had a big old dumpster. And he could dump that dump truck into that dumpster, and he'd have my dad was a teenager at the time, get a fire going underneath that dumpster and boil all that slop, obviously to get the pathogens out of it. And then you just had to go over there and you had to crack open the door on the side of the dumpster and just let all that come out into the trough, and the pigs would just go after it. Dad said that was the most horrible job in the world. He said, I hated pigs after that. And but yeah, even with a diet like that there was never a discussion that I understood that there was a taint issue when it came to the boars.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a combination of, breed, feed, how the animal's raised, what it's subjected to, genetic diversity in there. I think all those things certainly combine to make a difference.
Yeah, so we've kind of discussed an argument for maybe not even messing with castration, but getting back to Chuck's original point, if you're doing any type of production where you are trying to represent your farm as a business, if you're trying to generate revenue from that, it's just too great a risk to lose. Like you said, as Chuck said, it's tough to get your reputation back once it's tarnished with a bad product. So I think even if you think, well, I've really bred this out, there's no chance I'm going to have that. Man, if you put all this time and money and effort into building a customer base, I would recommend not challenging that or not testing that and having you're taking the risk of losing it. And of course, we also mentioned some other benefits of castration as well. Okay,
yeah,
Chuck.
And one other thing, I think if you do have a boar and he's kind of at the end of his service life, maybe that's a good opportunity to do that on farm processing and get some experience in doing that kind of thing. I know, Sandra would love to process a pig here on farm. We don't, because we have to be inspected and because we sell to the public and that kind of thing. But, if you do have a boar that's, he's at the end of his service life, maybe that's a good animal for you to process on farm and consume for yourself if there's no issue with it.
Yeah. Well, tell her to pick one out this November. We'll come down and help. Because I actually enjoyed it. It was a lot of work. And we actually did a video of this. But here's one thing I'll recommend if you do it. When you've got it hanging in the barn, letting it kind of cure and dry out, and you think you're man enough to have your son cut one side of the halved pig free so you can toss it over your shoulder to take it to the processing table. And as soon as he cuts the string loose, you realize, this was a 2.5-year-old boar. This is probably not going to be market weight. Yeah, that about killed me. I think I heard every vertebrae in my back just compress as that thing landed across my shoulder. I was like, holy moly, that's heavy.
Oh, man.
But yeah. No, that I do. There ain't nothing like a good old fashioned hog killing, and that's not to sound inhumane, but there's just something neat about old school ways of doing stuff like that on the farm. So yeah, if Sandra wants to do it and she wants help, you let us know. We'll come down there and we'll help cut one up.
Gladly. And it beats taking that animal to run it through a sale barn and getting $50 for it.
Exactly.
I mean, at least you've got you've got some usable product there that you can enjoy yourself.
Exactly. And that's the thing. We talk about this all the time. You give your animals the best life possible. They have one bad day, and I feel like I almost owe it to my pig that if I'm done with him, I don't want to just put him on a trailer and I don't know where you're going or what's going to happen to you. Good luck. It's like I almost want to say, well, you started here, I want you to end here, and to
absolutely
close the loop is the last bit of service you get to do is you get to feed our family. So,
absolutely, yeah, no doubt.
Okay, so let's shift gears here. So let's go over. So I think we've convinced our audience maybe. If they've never castrated, say, okay, I got to castrate, or I've had people help me castrate. Now it's time to do it my own. But let's also talk about, let's not be fear-mongering here, but let's talk about the complications that can occur with castration. And then I want to get you kind of swing the gate full around, and let's talk about the humane issues that are coming up when it comes to traditional castration process first. So first of all, Chuck, let's start here. So what are, and we kind of mentioned some of these already, but what are the concerns, the potential complications with castrating on farm?
Yeah, so there are a couple things that you want to watch out for. Number one is bleeding. Once you do the castration, you put that animal back over in the weaning pen or put it back with its mom or whatever the procedure that you're following there. You want to watch that animal, for a little while, just to make sure, 15, 20 minutes, just to make sure you don't have any excessive bleeding. If you do, you're going to need to catch that animal up and control that. So bleeding is one thing. Second, you want to watch out for any signs of infection. So around the incision sites, you're going to look for any redness, swelling, any drainage of any nasty green, goopy looking stuff. If you can get close enough to it, or some of that drainage is on the ground, does it have a foul odor? If you've got something like that, then you probably got a surgical site infection there, and you're going to have to treat that with either some antibiotics or some topical medication or something like that. You'd want to refer to your local vet for that. Missing a testicle. We've always been really, really careful to make sure that we got both testicles. But I bought a pig one time, a piglet. Bought it specifically to use as a boar. Got it home, got to looking at that thing, and he wasn't packing a full wallet. He was only halfway there. So make sure if you're going to do castration that you're getting both of those testicles, because a pig can still be virile and serviceable with only one. So if you're going to do castration, make sure that you get both of them.
Yeah.
And then you want to just watch the animal in general after the procedure's done. And what we found typically, man, after about 24, 36 hours, you can't tell that anything's happened to that piglet unless you're looking at its hindside.
Right.
So just good farm management, good husbandry practices, making sure that animal's cared for and you're looking for any untoward effects.
Yeah, I agree. I think observation is key, and being able to head off any massive complications. We talked about hernia, and those are the type of things that if you discover one that's got a really bad hernia, then that's mostly going to be a cull pig. But just looking and observing that piglet after you've done the process, and I agree with you. It seems like 2-3 hours later, you toss them back in there, and they're just running around having a good old time. And it seems like mine have scabbed over, and and in 3 days you've got really nice, well developed scabs, and the scar tissue is already in place, and they're not slowing down. It's like nothing's happened. And that's excuse me, and that's again another reason. It's just my own justification in my head, I think, but it just seems like the younger, it's like getting circumcised. Would you want to get circumcised at day 8, or would you rather wait to about 2 years old to get circumcised? So it seems like the younger it happens, it seems like they can get over it quicker, but maybe that's just my own rationale.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So there's things to look out for, and if it's one of those things that if you're going to do castration for the first time, I really recommend it. While YouTube, I love YouTube. Chuck and I both have YouTube channels. You can, I've got a video of castration. Chuck, you probably have a video out there on castration, don't you?
I do. I went to, when I was getting ready for the podcast episode, I went to Google piglet castration, and my video pops up. So
very good.
Yeah, that's it's trending on the Google search. But yeah, we've got a video. But and I think I know where you're going with your comment. If you're going to do this for the first time, I really would recommend a mentor, someone that has experience, to come over and help you.
Absolutely.
Or go help them. Actually, the video that's up, a good friend of ours reached out to me. He'd watched our YouTube channel. We weren't friends at the time, and he figured out that we were about 20 minutes away. And he said, "Hey, could I hire you to come over and castrate my piglets for me? I've never done that. I have no experience." And so I said, "Sure, can we video it?" And he's like, "Yeah, no problem." So we went over, castrated for him. And then ever since then, he's been off and running and does his own thing. Yeah. But yeah, first time out, I would recommend a mentor, going and helping someone, or having somebody come over and help you and show you how to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of those things that you can watch our videos and they'll probably give you some good insight. Hopefully they give you some good insight and you can learn something from them. But there's just something about hands-on with somebody over your shoulder, or you actually helping and hold as you watch it be done. And usually in those situations, if you're going to go help somebody, they usually have more than one pig to castrate. So you may get to the point where on the 5th or 6th or the 20th pig, maybe they're ready to hand the knife to you and you can give it a go. So that's, to me, that's the best way to learn, is to be that hands-on.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go back over to this American Veterinarian Medical Association discussion. So again, it's the welfare implication of swine castration. So this idea that, is this an unnecessary stress for the piglet? Is this causing a lot of pain? Is this something that needs to be done better? As as good representatives, as good stewards of God's creation, should we be putting our piglets through this type of pain? Now, this document is just taking a pure medical approach to this. So they're talking about some of the ramifications or some of the issues with surgical castration. Do these piglets indeed feel pain? Yes, in their study they do, because of all of these signs they see, the squealing, the heart rate, all those type of things, a certain amount of cortisol that builds up. This document gets into all of those type of things and discusses that surgical castration is indeed painful. So we've talked about complications things. So what's the article's options here? So the first two they get into are anesthesia, and that's general and local anesthesia. So I know all of you guys that raise pigs on pasture, you've got some nitrous oxide sitting over in the corner of the barn, or you've got all kinds of options when it comes to general anesthesia. So all you do is you take your piglet, you put the little mask on it, and you've got it on the table there, and you wait for it to get knocked out, and then you go ahead and castrate. Chuck, I didn't see your nitrous setup there. How big of a setup do you have for nitrous?
We had that next to the snipe nest up here in the woods. That's where I keep that. So, yeah, that's where mine is. Sorry, I should have brought that out and showed that to you.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, this article even recognizes that it says right here, on-farm use of anesthesia is rare due to the range of economic, logistical, and safety issues. Yeah, it's not like I can go to I can get on Google and Google how to be an anesthesiologist and learn that in a couple days and be able to knock out anything, much less a decent sized mammal. So anesthesia is nothing to play around with. You can kill that pig faster than you can blink in an eye if you're giving it general anesthesia and you don't know how to dose it properly. So that's one of those things where, as Chuck mentioned, if you're going to use general anesthesia, you're going to have help, right? You're going to have a professional come in, and a veterinarian in our neck of the woods. I don't have any veterinarians that do anything with pigs, so I don't know that I would be able to find one that says, yeah, I can come give your pig general anesthesia. Now, again, it's not necessarily inhalants. There are some injectable anesthesias that can be given, but there again, it's the issues with not only handling that specific anesthesia, but then the dosing of it. When it's time to give a pig a shot, that's not necessarily an easiest thing to do. Would you agree, Chuck?
Absolutely. And, if you're going to use some kind of IV anesthetic or intramuscular anesthetic on that animal, it takes time for that to take effect.
Yeah.
It's not like you give that animal a shot and then instantly it's asleep or it's groggy or drowsy. It takes time for that medication to work. And, maybe that works if you've got, your small homestead and you've 2 or 3 pigs and, you've got a litter of maybe, 3 or 4 males and you've got half a day to work with that. But, again, where we're doing sometimes 20 at a time, we just don't have, 2 days to work through all that.
Yeah.
So for us, it's a time factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just, there's for every complication or issue associated with castrating, you're just going to amplify that by trying to incorporate anesthesia. The article also talks about local anesthesia. So, using a local anesthetic like lidocaine. So again, you're going to have to wait and see. And it's not like the pig can tell you when you touch it on the testicles. Can you feel that? Can you feel that? So it's just one of those things that the input's going to be whatever the input is, and the response from that it's going to be a guessing game as well. But the expense, the fear of improper application, And then, of course, the time constraints, as Chuck said, if you've got 15 to 20 pigs and you're waiting for all of them to respond to anesthesia, then that's more than a day's worth of work. That's going to be a while. Another option.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think with some of the new rules about over the counter, being able to obtain animal medications over the counter, I think that may become even more difficult going into the future.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we're looking at is probably the biggest issue is economic, because if we've got to have a veterinarian out here to sedate 20 piglets, then that's a bill that's in the thousands and thousands of dollars. So the cost of your pork just went up exponentially, which may price you completely out of the market in the first place, or kill so much of your profit margin it's not worth doing. Analgesias are another thing that they talk about. So some oral medication, but there again, giving a pill, trying to give oral medication to a piglet is interesting. It's challenging. We'll just say that. So other things, I thought this was interesting, and we've talked about breed selection already, and this article actually gets down to this at the end, so we'll save that for the last. But it's interesting in looking at. I'm just going to read alternatives here. So the alternative section says surgical castration has not been performed for many years in some countries, including the United Kingdom, Ireland, New Zealand, and Australia. In most cases, the approach to minimizing boar taint was slaughter of pigs before puberty. So that's kind of the approach, is they're going to move up the processing date of the pig. So Chuck, shoot holes in that. What's the pros and cons of doing that if you had to move up your processing dates on your pigs?
Yes. So a couple of things that you're going to run into there. Number one, you're going to have a reduction in the amount of product that you have. Before those pigs reach puberty, I mean, they're going to be pretty small and pretty lean. So you're going to end up with maybe some lean pork. You may have some sausage that's kind of dry, no belly or very minimal belly. So that's going to affect your bacon production. And then you're going to have to be running through those animals. You're going to need more. You're going to need more piglets faster if you're processing those things. That a male pig can reproduce. What is it, Troy? Like about 4 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do it before puberty, I mean, you're going to have to increase your production of animals to maintain the same level of production in terms of the amount of product. You're going to have more animals because they're going to be smaller. Your yield is going to be much, much less.
Yeah. And I agree. Your yield's less. And like you said, the quality is going to decline. I mean, nobody wants a bone-in pork chop that's the size of an Oreo. It's not going to go over well. No,
not at all.
And I think that rubs against completely what we're trying to do with pastured pigs. It's kind of the slow food movement. So in my sense, where I'm doing the large blacks, they're finishing out about 8 to 9 months. So they're past puberty. They are in reproductive swing big time by then, and that's when I'm seeing the maximum production there. I'm getting the best yield, and I got a nice fat cap, all that type of stuff. So as we deal more with these heritage breeds or utilize some of our hybrid vigor here, then that rubs against this. So if you're looking at these CAFOs where they've got this genetic closed area, and they're going to be able to produce a pig super fast that gains weight super fast, and it's that type of production pig, that may work, but we all know that the quality of CAFO pork, we feel, is subpar to what we experience. So I don't think that's really an option for a pastured pig operation to say, well, let's just process before they become sexually mature.
Yeah, again, I think just from the amount of product standpoint, it's going to take a whole lot of 4-month-old piglets to get you a significant amount of sausage. And if you've got a good sized market and you're burning through a lot of sausage, I mean, it's going to take a lot of animals to get there. And then, you've got to have more sows for breeding. I mean, it's a cascading effect. I mean, the worse it gets, the worse it gets.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I did skip over here, but I do want to, and I don't know anything about this, Chuck, maybe you do, but again, this article's 10 years old, but talking about this opportunity of immunocastration. So reading this article, there's a little paragraph here about it, but it's basically injecting of a protein compound that works like an immunization to induce antibody production against gonadotropin-releasing hormone. The GnRH actually did a lab experiment in college on gonadotropin-releasing hormones effects on the pituitary gland in rats. But anyway, something that I do know something about, actually. So, but this process requires 2 injections. So you actually, basically what you're doing is you're giving your boar a shot 8 to 11 weeks prior to slaughter, and then the second one 4 weeks prior to slaughter. So it's almost like, okay, we're going to try to head off boar taint by immunizing our boar 8 to 11 weeks prior to slaughter for the first dose, and then booster, or whatever you want to call it, at the 4-week period. And what's going to happen is that protein is going to work against the GnRH to actually break it down so that hormone does not kick in and cause the steroids, these gonadosteroids, to really ramp up. So it's kind of interesting. It's obviously using immunization to head off boar taint. So I don't know, Chuck, from a knee-jerk reaction, what would your knee-jerk to that be? The pros and cons.
Yeah. So my very first thought about that is, part of the reason that customers come to us is because we don't use antibiotics and hormones and those kinds of things on our animals. I mean, we try our best to not give those animals anything that we don't just have to. Yes, we do worm, but that's a health issue. And if an animal gets sick, yeah, we'll treat it. But other than that, we don't use anything. And I'm just, the first reaction that I have is that going against the grain of what we're trying to do in this pastured pig space and raising these animals in more of a sustainable way. So that's the first thought that I have on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. That I do. I think that rubs against what we're trying to do with more of a natural product. And again, all we're doing here with immunocastration is just avoiding boar taint. We're still not dealing with birth control in this situation. We're still not dealing with unwanted pregnancies, because you're just looking at that 11-week window prior to processing. So you still have that opportunity. And just, to me, that's another thing, man. You're looking at management, and if you're talking 1 or 2 boars, okay, maybe that's a little bit easier to deal with. But if you're looking at, if you farrow on farm, then you're going to have a pretty good run of boars going on there on farm. So it's one of those things that the cost associated with it, the management, the proper dosing. I mean, these are injections, so all the complications that go along with that. So that's just going to add more cost and more time to your process. Rub against what Chuck said, rub against the type of products we're looking to produce, and then not give you the full benefit of a castration anyway when it comes to aggressive behavior and birth control. So, but I'm looking here, this immunocastration under FDA approved is a product called Improvest, and it's also labeled as Improvac, and it says here, again, 10-year-old document, that it's used in more than 60 countries. So it is a commonly used process, I guess, in CAFOs. I've never heard of anyone using it on a pasture operation, but that is something that's out there. So interesting.
Yeah, and quite frankly, real quick, some of the most passionate comments that I've had on some of my castration videos have been related to analgesia, anesthesia, and this type of thing. And typically, those comments come from folks that are not in the United States.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We from stuff that I've read and even comments, I agree with you. I've had some comments as well that they've many countries feel we're in the dark ages, that we are still being inhumane towards our herd, and the fact that we're processing without any type, or processing that we're castrating without any type of anesthesia or pain management, and that we've got to get with the times. So it is an issue that I think is going to just keep coming around. So at some point, the government's here to save us, right? So at some point, I think the government's going to step in and say, okay, we have to address this, and there's going to be a lobby one direction or the other. But it's something we as pastured pig farmers got to keep on our radar, because it may be something at some point we have to address. Now, I do want to say there were other couple things that they said as alternatives, and one of them was, of course, selection, is that boar taint has a genetic component and may be reduced through breeding. It's just that's the only line item they have in this entire paragraph or entire article when it comes to what Chuck and I have already talked about, that maybe there is an opportunity to breed it out. And then another option they say is sperm selection. But it says, although current technology is not efficient enough for commercial use, it might be further developed to allow the production of only female piglets. So that would be, goodness, that could be some, some in utero work. It could be even some in vitro work where you're actually selecting genetically, you're genetically modifying to say, hey, we're only producing female litter. And oh my goodness, that opens a whole nother can of worms when it comes to a traditionally raised slow food movement. I don't know. I mean, are you ready to are you ready to work with genetically modified pigs, Chuck?
No, we try to avoid GMOs as much as we can. I don't think that we want to try to specifically introduce that into something that we're doing. So, real quick, Troy, have you heard of anyone that's doing any breeding trials with trying to breed this out? I've not read or heard of anybody that's doing that.
I think Walt Jeffries up in oh my goodness, Vermont, Sugar Mountain Farms. Mm-hmm. I think he has probably the most comprehensive article and data that he has collected on his own farm when it comes to eliminating boar taint. He does not castrate at all, and he does sell his pork to people. So he is a firm believer that through feed and the environment that the pigs are raised in and the breed that he uses, that he has managed to breed out boar taint 100%. Well, I don't know that he would say 100%, but he is extremely confident that boar taint is not an issue in his production. So, and I know there's others that would say the same. So I don't know. Like I said, I get to the point where I'm with you, Chuck. I don't have the confidence, nor do I want to risk the customer base in not trying it. And until somebody from the government tells me you have to do this, then I will continue to castrate the way that I do. I mean, there's a chance if there's a spray on local anesthesia that's over the counter that's I can spray it on like the iodine and it becomes numbing. Lidocaine that's that effective and that quick, then yeah, I'd give that a shot. That's not a problem at all. But I'm just not in a situation where I can afford, nor can I even have the options of getting a veterinarian involved to do some more of these complicated processes. Yeah,
expensive and time consuming.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, and it's one of those things that when you get right down to it, we don't just farm for money, but money is what allows us to continue to farm, right? So we do it for the love of the animals. We do it because we love being outside and all the things that go along with that. But you're not out there raising and processing 60 pigs a year just because it's fun to do. It's one of those things that you have to have a profit from it to be able to continue doing what you're doing. So we have to look at that. That has to be one of our driving forces and why we do what we do on pasture. So I think some of these things are going to rub against that profit margin and maybe make it cost ineffective to be able to continue to raise pigs if we're forced to do some of these things.
Yeah, and what we're seeing in our area, there is a lot of folks that are looking for locally raised, ethically raised, because even take the castration piece out of it. I still feel like what we're doing by raising these animals on pasture and allowing them to express, as Joel would say, the pigness of the pig. I think we're still 150% ahead of a CAFO pig in the way those animals are being raised. And I think folks are becoming more and more aware of that. They appreciate what we as farmers are trying to do. And we're seeing folks that in our area, again, are really starting to vote with their food dollar and making this a choice when they go to decide what they're going to feed their family. And, if castration is what we're hinging that thing on, again, I'm like you. I think we're going to keep doing what we're doing until we're told we can't.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Chuck, do you have any other parting comments on castration before we wrap it up here?
No, the only thing I would say is that, for you guys out there that are castrating piglets, if your wife learns to do it, just be aware of that and mind your P's and Q's and make sure there's not a bucket beside your bed whenever you go to sleep at night.
Yeah, or sleep on your belly.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. She starts looking at you kind of funny, then you know you're up to something. All right. So, well, Chuck, if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you on all the interwebs? Give a shout out to all your different sources there.
Yeah. So we're kind of everywhere. SheratonParkFarms.com is our website. You can go over there and find out a little bit more about us and what we're doing. We have a pretty active Facebook page, Sheraton Park Farms. We're also on Instagram. We don't do a whole lot on Instagram, but we do put some pictures up over there. And then we're pretty active on YouTube. We're doing a video or a couple of videos a week. I think I looked the other day. We're about 360 some now. And so you can find out all about us over there.
Yeah, and I got to say, if you guys that are listening, I'm sure you probably already found his YouTube channel now, but if you haven't, I strongly encourage you to do so, because Chuck has just he's got a knack for just being able to explain things very, very well. So you not only get to see what he's doing, but he explains why he does it, and it's really, really educational. I really appreciate the way he delivers his content on YouTube. It's not just entertainment, it's learning. And so if you're looking to see how somebody runs an operation that, I guess it's not fair to say that you're a full-time farmer, Chuck, because you do have a day job and you do manage other stuff, but your farm is not just a hobby farm. You guys are pretty good scale production. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, we're like I said, we'll do 60 pigs this year. We'll process somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 25 cattle, 1,500 to 1,750 chickens, and about 300 turkeys. So yeah, and a couple thousand dozen eggs. So yeah, we're kind of past the hobby farm deal, but we still try to do things as economically as we can and as smart as we can, and following traditional methods as much as we can.
Very good, very good. Yeah. So if you want to learn how Chuck has managed and Chuck and Sandra have worked to get to where they are, then check out his YouTube channel. Very informative there. Well, Chuck, brother, I appreciate you coming on the podcast again, man. It was a good conversation. I'm looking at our ticker here. We are an hour and 15, so I appreciate you coming on, and I want to be sensitive to your time, so I'm going to let you go. But I appreciate everybody listening, and we hope to do more specific topics like this. So we'll get into this more as we move into the year. Chuck, I pray you have a good week, man. Take care.
You do the same. Thanks, buddy.
All right, we'll see you. Well, I really appreciate Chuck coming on the podcast. I thought that was a pretty good discussion. A lot of good input there from him, and how he handles castration on his farm. And again, so many things to take away from that. But the one thing I really want you all to take away from is there's no one way to do a lot of the things we do on our farm. There's things that work for us. There's things that you just kind of get in the habit of doing, but it's also good to hear other ideas and other processes. So if you need to make an adjustment, then at least that information's out there. And I don't know if you guys picked up on it or not, but Chuck is from the South. You may be wondering, listening, okay, I'm not quite sure with that dialect where he's coming from, but Chuck is Southern. I know that may be shocking to some of you all, but I give Chuck a hard time. We like to talk about the different draws we have. Being a West Virginian, we have our own, and of course, the further south you go, the more the dialect changes. But be sure to check out Sheraton Park Farms if you haven't. Also check out his YouTube channel. Now, I'm going to try to remember from the time of ending the recording of this bumper to actually uploading this file to make sure I incorporate the link to that document we referenced so you guys can see that. And I've even written myself a little note right here beside my computer. If I didn't, Noah, let me know. And I'll make sure to get it posted there. But check that out. Also, if you guys would like to specifically address topics, my goodness, I cannot talk this evening. If you would like to request specific topic discussions, then by all means, reach out to me, troy@redtoolhouse.com, or if you're on the Pastured Pig Facebook group, just simply tag me and say, hey, how about this topic? And we'll do that. And I'll try to find somebody to co-discuss that topic with. So it's not just me, you not just hear me rattling off for 45 minutes. And we'll do some of these deeper dives into the topics associated with what we do on pasture with our pigs. Also coming up, I believe I'm going to try to start targeting some of the breed associations to reach out to them and get them on the podcast to talk about their specific breed associations. So look forward to that. If you would happen to be a part of those associations or know whom I need to speak with, by all means, drop me a line and let me know, and I'll start bird dogging those people to get some discussion set up. And of course, as always, if you haven't been on the podcast and you want to just let us know about what you're doing with pastured pigs, I would love to have you on here and have you featured. Well, I pray everyone have a great week and enjoy. If you're in temperate climates, I pray that you enjoy this beautiful fall that we've had already. My goodness, it's been fantastic here the past couple weeks. Although it's a whole nother story. My trip to Montana last week really got me jonesing for cold weather. So Montana was absolutely gorgeous. But that's a whole nother discussion. Actually, that's going to be something that ends up on our YouTube channel as well. All right. I pray everyone take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.